The one thing that Surah Kahf teaches us is that things are not what they seem. You know, something happens and we think that that's evil or it's bad, but actually there's khair in it, there's good in it. And something, we look at it and we think it's good, but actually there's evil in there, there's bad in it. That's what Surah Kahf is for. And it's very important for these times. You have to picture the scene. I've been away for a year on my internship and I'm now just coming back to university for my third year of my degree. I haven't seen any of my friends or my other colleagues, class fellows, for about a year. And it's October and I'm just walking into university, and it's been a few weeks since September 11th took place. And I walk into the canteen and most people are speaking about September 11th, right? At this point, it's been about 2 or 3 weeks. It's the first major political event of our lives, probably at this level, at that time as well. We're still very young, don't forget. I'm around about 2021 at this age. And September 11th is on everybody's minds. The canteen, everybody's either talking about it or thinking about it. But there's a change in the atmosphere as compared to the years before. But because I haven't seen my friends for about a year or two, we're all kind of catching up as well. And we're just kind of, just getting back into university life. Now, with this such a big event that took place like this, what happened is, to be honest, I'd also just got back from Hajj about a year earlier as well. So all of a sudden, this started creating this shift in the student and youth culture. We all started kind of gravitating towards the Islamic society and the prayer rooms. We all started kind of questioning our identity. Previously, who might have not been particularly religious, all of a sudden started to take a little bit more of an interest in religion because our identity was being questioned, and we were having to really question ourselves and question our faith and question our stance on things. So that started driving more and more people, a lot more of the youth, into the Islamic societies. I think there was a bit of I wouldn't call it a resurgence, but there was a little bit of like a spurt towards the Islamic society and things like that. And then what started to happen was a lot of characters started to emerge. And I think up until now, I would say, at least amongst the youth, political Islam hadn't really been discussed that much, hadn't really been addressed that much. But all of a sudden, people started to want to talk about the political aspect of Islam and what the political stance is on things, because now it was being questioned politically. And we had these characters that started to emerge, and they were going around on, what you call the university circuit. So they would go from university to university, and they would speak in lecture halls, and they would speak about the political aspects of Islam, and they would, try and bring the youth in to start having the conversations about that kind of stuff. And there was this one particular character who got a lot of prominence. He became the leader of a particular party, and he was doing the university circuit. And I remember he came to my university a few times. And each time he came, he had this massive, if you want to call it, a fan following. He had a complete entourage around him. There was an entourage that was following him, that was around him, that was traveling with him. But there was an entourage that would follow him at each university as well. So he came to mine, he came and gave a couple of speeches here and there. And, outwardly, for all intents and purposes, this was a very religious human being, right? He had the beard, he was praying 5 times a day. All he was doing was talking about Islam. He was encouraging the youth towards Islam, everything like that. But there was just something about him. Every time I met him, I just got a very uneasy feeling about him. It's just something that's not right about that guy. And, when he would give the lectures, there'd be the odd thing that he would say that would be problematic. So like 80% or 90% of what he would say would be the most profound truth that you've probably ever heard. But there would be that kind of 5%, 3%, 1% that would be problematic. And when I would discuss that with other people, and you've got to understand, I wasn't the only guy that was kind of uncomfortable with him. There were a few other voices as well. I was actually quite quiet about the whole thing, but inwardly, I was uncomfortable. A lot of people would say to me, "You're being unfairly critical. You're being paranoid. You're being cynical. This guy was almost getting treated like a messiah, but something just wasn't right about this guy." And I never really ended up really taking him that seriously. I might have gone to the odd lecture, but I just didn't really follow him the way that the other guys followed him. And then after like a year or two, that whole thing started to kind of die down. There was a lot of talk about how the university campuses were breeding extremism and the youth were turning to kind of extremist ways and all this kind of stuff. There's all this kind of talk that was taking place. And characters like him were being mentioned. and I'm not going to mention any names at the moment, but characters like him were being mentioned, and the kind of affiliations that he had and this kind of stuff was kind of all being brought up. And then those kind of voices then basically started to calm down quite a bit over the next few years. But obviously a year later, we had the Iraq War. So then it would end up creating a resurgence. And then there were other, issues that took place as well politically over the years after that. So the whole thing was problematic, but obviously it would keep bringing out a lot of these characters that would come and speak and kind of represent Islam on a political level, represent the youth, right, and represent the voice of the Muslims, so to speak. A lot of us hadn't elected these people to speak for us, but for some reason they ended up speaking for us. And for some reason, they ended up becoming the face of political Islam for us. They ended up becoming the ambassadors and the voices for us. But a lot of us actually didn't want these people to speak on our behalf. But for some reason, they were being chosen to speak. They were being given the platform. And that's what didn't really seem to make any sense. It wasn't until good 10 to 12 years later that it finally transpired that one of these main characters, in fact, not one of them, a few of these main characters that were being given a platform, and even though they were being branded as extremists, they were still being given a platform. They were still being given a chance to speak. And then obviously the opposing voices were criticizing them, and all of us Muslims were getting embarrassed that these people are out there representing us and this kind of stuff. But it came out about 10, 12 years later, it came out that these few characters, they were part of the Quilliam Foundation, and they'd actually been hired to actually infiltrate the Islamic societies, infiltrate the youth, and lead them towards extremism so that it could basically push other people away, the rest of the kind of the youth actually away from Islam, because they'd see this such an extreme version of Islam. They would be so embarrassed by it that it would actually turn them away. And it would actually make it difficult for them to actually feel associated or just feel some sort of affinity towards the religion. So this thing was an actual act of subversion. It was a directed attack. And, Quilliam, if you study it long and far enough, you'd find that the funding sources were very questionable. They weren't Islamic sources. They were very questionable. If you want to learn more about this, you can go and check out my friend, Dr. William Barillo. He speaks about this at a much more detailed level than I can speak about it. But I just kind of want to give you like an overview of the whole thing. Before we continue on this video, I just want to invite you to my Discord community. Look, the world has changed, and it is changing still. And on my Discord, which is a simple mobile app that you can use, you can stay in touch with other like-minded people like me who are staying informed of the things that are happening around the world that are going to affect our daily lives very, very soon. So come and join me on my Discord community, and let's grow together and let's navigate this changing world order together. And this guy then actually came on record. This main guy who'd actually been going around the university circuit, he actually came on record, and he actually was on video and actually admitted, along with some of the other people that had been these voices of Islam, so to speak, and admitted that he'd been paid as part of the think tank to come and basically infiltrate the youth. These people bring a very profound truth with them. So a lot of the things that they say are actually very profound, and they are actually the truth, right? And they dress it up in such a way that's actually very attractive. It's very seductive. There's a lot of theatrics that goes around them, and for some reason they get given a platform as well. And that becomes very, very seductive to impressionable people, and especially to the youth, right? It becomes very, very attractive because there's so much pain that's being experienced by people in vulnerable positions, right? Emotional pain. And society-wise, there's kind of this feeling of there's nobody that represents us, there's no voice for us, nobody's understanding our anguish, and nobody's understanding our pain. And then so you get these kind of Pied Pipers and these characters that come along and they speak to that pain, they speak to that void. And that's what makes them very, very attractive. And the kind of the methods that they use to kind of attract that crowd, metaphorically speaking, is very much like a snake charmer, right? Kind of doing all of this basically, and and bringing people in, and it attracts people. But then there's always that kind of 3-5% of what they're saying that's very, very problematic, and actually is so problematic that it kind of negates everything else that they've said. That's the problem with these guys. And there's actually a term for this. It's known as the esoteric deviation. Is that you get so inside the religion, you get so inside somebody's mind, you win their heart so much that you've got such an inroad. Once you put that poison in, and it's a slow, small poison that you put in, and it's so kind of minimal, they don't even feel it, they don't even notice it. But slowly but surely it kind of takes over their heart, it takes over their mind, it just kills them from the inside. That's what these snake charmers basically do. They're like these Pied Pipers, right? They play a bit of music, they do the theatrics, and they just kind of attract all these people that are in despair. And the thing is, These people never stop. The characters never go away. They get replaced by different actors, and these people are ultimately just paid opposition. They get replaced. One character just kind of disappears. He eventually admits, either officially or unofficially, or one way or another, he gets exposed. This person was an undercover agent all along, right? And he used snake charming tactics. But these people never stop, and the ultimate playbook that they use is always the same. They press upon a pain of the individual. They speak to that vulnerability. They speak to the despair and anguish that person is feeling. And they come across as being very brave and speaking to the establishment and speaking to the status quo. And they come across as a messiah or a hero or a savior. And the techniques that they used, they have some sort of seduction, some sort of magic to it, right? There's some sort of entertainment to it. And they kind of speak to the lingo, so to speak, the lingua franca of the person that's, the kind of the key demographic that's experiencing this pain and this angst. Right. So and they perfect that. They get very, very good at understanding that, and they speak very, very well to it. And they end up creating a following. And then slowly but surely they start leading them astray. And that person almost always becomes an enemy of the establishment, becomes an enemy of the status quo. That's kind of how they win the hearts of the people who are already feeling disenfranchised. They're already feeling angst towards the establishment and the status quo, because capitalism will do that to you. Capitalism will always make you feel disenfranchised. Because it goes against the fitrah, it will always make you feel in pain all the time. So these guys, they come along and they're basically soothsayers, and they soothe that part of the spirit that is in a lot of pain. And they will do whatever it is that they need to do to basically win you over. But the general playbook is largely the same. The execution might be different, right? Before it was a university circuit, now it's social media. Before the university circuit, it might have been books. It might have been music or whatever. There's different characters in different places. But ultimately, they will find the ultimate platform that is required, where those people are hanging around, where the youth is hanging around, or where those impressionable people are hanging around, and they will perfect their inroad towards those people. But the telltale sign really is when these people get given a platform. If, even though it seems like they're against the establishment, somehow everything that they're saying is being heard and being seen by everyone. Somehow the establishment is speaking about them and is criticizing them. That's usually a telltale sign, even though that should be the kind of the sign to say this person is not the person that should be followed because the establishment is against them. It's actually a counterintuitive thing, because these people usually paid opposition. And this has been done. This isn't something that's recent. This is not something that started happening last decade or the last 2 decades or the last 3 decades. This has been going on for hundreds of years. The Ottoman Empire collapsed this way because there were people that were paid to make inroads, and they found themselves, they climbed up the ranks and got themselves into top positions inside the Ottoman Empire. They got up inside the Mughal Empire. They got into high positions in politics in Muslim countries, in Saudi Arabia, in Pakistan, in India, and they got right up and they created that following. And then they started breaking it from the inside, right? And a lot of these people are still revered to this day, 20, 30, 50, 70, 80, 90 years later. They're still being hailed as heroes. But the one thing that you find common with these people is that they're actually quite immoral, especially if you look at it from a religious stance, right? Even though they're saying everything against the enemy, so to speak, they themselves are usually very problematic. They themselves are usually quite immoral. We've had political leaders that have been major political figures that are supposed to be representing the Muslims, and they're very problematic. They're, in their private lives, unfortunately, they're either guilty of fornication, or they've been drinking alcohol, or they've been doing drugs. They don't even pray. They're not doing any of those things, right? But outwardly, they do a few things. They mention the name of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, of the Prophet. They mention a few verses of the Quran, and that seems to be enough. The fact that they present themselves as so brave, and the fact that they have a platform, people seem to think that this must be the person that has been sent to us by Allah, and that must be the person that we need to follow. Because a lot of us, we kind of see ourselves in them. We kind of see how brave they are, just like we want to be, and how articulate they are, just like that we want to be, and how successful they are materially, just like we want to be. And it kind of speaks to that nafs. But ultimately, these people are just snake charmers, right? And that's what I want to say today, really, is just you got to be aware of the snake charmers. That's what you have to do. You have to look out for them. You have to look at the people who have questionable morality, who seem to criticize the state, but really in their actions, they don't really do anything apart from speaking against it. In their actions actually don't prove any of that, and who really attach themselves to the idea of material success. To be honest, anybody who's really speaking against the establishment and is speaking the real truths, I don't think they would ever really be given a platform. So all I'm saying is just be aware of the snake charmers. Just because they don't expose themselves now, or just because they don't get exposed now or in a year or in 2 years' time, give it a long enough time and you'll see the hypocrisy of it. But it's easy to get seduced. It's because there's so much pain and anguish and there's so much angst that we want somebody to come along as a hero. But you have to resist the temptation of it all. You have to be able to look through it. You have to be able to look through the facade. You have to be able to look through the seduction of it all. And I do think this is why Surah Kaf is also really important, especially understanding the interpretation of it, because the one thing that Surah Kaf teaches us is that things are not what they seem. Something happens and we think that that's evil or it's bad, but actually there's khair in it, there's good in it. And something, we look at it and we think it's good, but actually there's evil in there, there's bad in it. That's what Surah Kaf is for. And it's very important for these times, for our perception. We think things are facts, but actually they're opinions, even though we've observed them with our own eyes and our ears and all of our senses. I mean, if a prophet like Musa alayhi salam himself can be deceived by his senses or deceived by what he perceives, then who are we? And these lessons are being taught to us in Surah Kaf. So that's why I think Surah Kaf is very important. The recitation of it and the understanding of it as well. I think it's very important for us to understand that everything that we see on the outward, there's more going on in the inward. And we need to start looking at the inward of things. We have to start looking inside of ourselves, and we have to start looking, as much as we can, we have to start looking towards the inward of other things and other people as much as we can. And really start to understand, trying to really look within ourselves and see, are our senses deceiving us? Are we being seduced by the outward? We have to look into that.